You know those times when it comes to doing your monthly setup and you really just want to try something new? Well, that feeling really got me good this month because for my October bullet journal setup, I've tried something new on pretty much every layout. We have a new to me decorative style, new layouts, changes to existing ones, and also changes to my filming process. So normally when I do a monthly setup, I come into the filming process being very planned out. I have all of my layouts sketched out, I know what order my pages are going to be in, where my decorative elements are going. Effectively, everything's just planned out so I can come in, draw everything in, and just film that part of the process. But for October, I was umming and ahhing so much about what I wanted to do that I was like, stuff it, let's just start filming and see where we end up. Of course, tackling it in this way does present some issues, which we will get to in a second, but first of all, we're starting with the one element that I knew I wanted to have in my October setup, which was waterfall tabs. Now, I don't know where the term waterfall tabs came from because in my mind, these aren't really tabs. They're more like waterfall Dutch doors, or effectively, when you open the section that has the waterfall tabs, the first one is the narrowest, and then the next one is slightly wider, the one after that is slightly wider again, so on and so forth, so that when you view it from the front, you can see the edges of all of the pages that come underneath it, kind of in a tiered system, or a waterfall. Now, when I think tabs, I think smaller pieces of paper that hang out the side of a page, whether that be something like the right-hand side, like side tabs, or the top of your notebook, like top tabs. And that's why I find the term waterfall tabs for this type of setup a little bit odd, but that seems to be what they're commonly called, so that's what we're going to call them today. The one thing that I did do before I started filming this setup though, was measure out where I wanted to cut each of the pages for the setup. On the very last page of the setup, we didn't do any cutting on that one, so I didn't have to measure anything out, but on the one prior to it, I wanted to have 2 centimeters cut off the edge of the page. The one before that had 4 centimeters cut away, the one before that had 6, and the one we're actually working on here, I was cutting off 8 centimeters from that right-hand side. I decided to do this in centimeters rather than just measuring it up with the dot grid because I wanted each of those spaces for each of those Dutch door layouts to be the same width. So each of them kind of showing off about 2 centimeters of color. The color in question comes from the washi tape that I'm using in this setup. These washi tapes are from the washi tape shop. I don't believe they sell this specific set anymore, but they do have an amazing range and it does make decorating in your journal a lot faster. Now, in terms of the theme that I was going with for this month, and I feel like this is now a running idea in October, that I set the theme and then the aesthetic doesn't quite match, but it's okay. The theme is in theory supposed to be space, but it kind of turned out feeling a little bit more like astrology. I didn't really notice until maybe a little bit too late in the piece that a lot of the tapes that I'm using have a whole bunch of astrology symbols or signs, whether that be the actual constellations mapped out on the washi tape or something like the astrological wheel designs. I'm not too sad about it though because I do think that the tapes work really nicely together, which makes sense because they came as part of the same set, and I in particular did want to use tapes that came together for this waterfall idea, and this was the set of tapes that I felt I had enough of and were also in that kind of spacey realm. As I said, I feel like this is kind of becoming a repeating pattern for October. Last year my theme was supposed to be witches or witchcraft, and it kind of ended up being a little bit more celestial. Maybe that can be a running theme as well. Every October we do something with stars. I love stars. I have technically done a space theme in my bullet journal before, and I knew that with this setup I wanted to go with a slightly different route for it. In my previous space theme, I went for something that was a little bit more doodly, a little bit more cartoony, I suppose. And while I absolutely loved that setup, I wanted to make sure I did something slightly different this time around, especially because I very recently set up my partner, Vogel's journal, and we did a space theme in his journal for September, in pretty much the same style that I had done for my previous one. You'll have seen that as I'm putting down the washi tape on each of these Dutch door pages, I'm just ripping whichever edge is closer to the middle of the spread. While I wanted the outer edge of the tape to sit flush to the side of the page, I prefer having a more organic or ripped edge on my tape when it goes towards the inside of the spread. To go along with the washi tape though, I wanted to have some doodles that kind of represented the space theme, but I wanted to keep them fairly minimal. That's why we have those little circles on some of the Dutch doors we've been making, to kind of represent planets or moons. The ones on the front page are for my title for the month, while the ones that I set up on a later page are just for decoration. I didn't end up going in and filling them in with any kind of line work or anything, mainly because I didn't didn't want it to clash with the tape that I'd put down. But I did end up playing around with a couple of different options for it, which is one of those issues that I talked about with not having gone in prior and sketched everything out before I started filming. Normally I like to do that sketching in process so that my filming is a little bit more streamlined and I can give you guys estimates of how long it actually takes me to set up the layouts rather than idea generate, sketch them in, all of that kind of stuff. But one of the benefits of having done all of that idea generation while I was actually filming means that I can give you a much more accurate picture of how long these things actually take me. When it came to setting up for the entire of October, I had about 4 hours of footage. And when I went through and cut out all of the parts where I was just sitting there staring at a page, thinking about what I wanted to do next, I only had about 2.5 hours of footage. So that's an hour and a half of just thinking things through. There were a couple of things done prior to filming. So like we talked about, I came in knowing that I wanted to do those waterfall tabs, and I knew that I wanted to use this set of washi tape, but something I wasn't so sure on was what colored pens was I going to use. Given the fact that I was using 5 different colors of tape in the setup, I didn't want to add too many other colors, so I consulted my swatch sheet that I have in my long-term collections journal to find pen colors that matched the colors that we already have from those tapes. I wanted to have a nice gradient, and once I'd picked out a pen color for each of the tapes, I figured I might as well add 2 more and just make it a full set of 7, because then at least I have 1 color for each day of the week. And also 1 colour for each of the letters in October. Technically speaking, the full palette is actually 8 pens because I used a separate purple colour to highlight every second line on the calendar page and a couple of other pages in the setup. At a couple points during the setup, I thought to myself that I really should have opted for grey for that, maybe the N95 pen, but I actually quite like that I did end up going with purple. I think it just adds a bit more vibrancy to the pages, and I feel that the grey would have ended up making it look a little bit too desaturated. Given that I've picked out the pens, I do of course have to go add those colours to the swatch that I have at the front of my journal, and then we can get into colouring in the days of the week. I really like the gradient effect, I think it's very pretty. And after this is where the fun of Jess sitting around for long periods of time just thinking about her layout came in. You can see I laid down some washi tape on the left hand side of the spread, but I wasn't completely sold on it, so I didn't bother cutting away all of it. And then I was thinking about what am I going to do with those little planets that I have on my waterfall tabs. I thought it might be good to add in some contrast because the majority of the colours that we're using are the pastel shades, but black looked a little bit too heavy, so I ended up not going for that. And I opted to change the colour of the washi tape down the side so that I could keep all of the washi on this spread in particular being the same type. So just using that one purple washi tape. Now if you've seen one of my monthly setup videos before, you can probably notice at this stage something that's different about my setup, and that's that the very first page of October has my monthly calendar. Typically that very first page would be for a projects list, or maybe the title page, depending on how I'm setting it up, but usually the very first spread of any monthly setup has a projects list and a cover page. And usually the project is on the left and the cover page is on the right. This time, however, I didn't want to have the projects list take up a full page, and I also needed to be a little bit more considerate regarding with which pages were going where, because we have those waterfall tabs. Because in making the waterfall tabs, you're cutting away parts of the page, it means that you don't have the same amount of real estate on each of the spreads to put those layouts in. So I needed to think a little bit more carefully about which layouts in particular would be best suited for which amount of space. I knew that the monthly calendar was going to take up a full page, but I didn't want to put it on the very last page of the setup because I like having it closer to the front. For that reason, I opted to have it up front, and I figured that this would be a good opportunity to try having my projects list and my cover page kind of combined into one. The 3 boxes that I'm putting on that projects list on the right are one for my memberships, or the perks that my team members get, one for my YouTube videos, or the content that I'm going to be releasing in video format, and then the one at the bottom is just for any other projects that come up. I don't expect to have a lot of those, so that box is a lot smaller. Finishing off my cover page though by lettering in October in those little planet doodles. And before we flip on over to the next spread, we're just going to have a look at how September was going. For September, I went with a crime scene investigation theme and kind of themed all my doodles around out, a kind of crime evidence board. It was fun getting back to something that was a little bit more doodly, a little bit more cartoony, and also repeating those elements throughout all of the pages of the setup rather than just the monthly pages. Oftentimes with my setups, I choose not to put too much decoration on the weekly layouts or daily logs, just because decoration certainly adds to the time taken, but by intentionally making those decorative elements quite easy to do, it meant that I could repeat them on the other pages of the setup. I have a couple of pages left in September so that I can continue doing my daily logs for the rest of the month, and then after this I have an open spread for my goal setting for quarter 4, which we're going to be using in next week's live stream, where we're doing a goal setting workshop. If you wanted to make sure that you don't miss out on that workshop, be sure you're subscribed to the channel. But now we're flipping on over into what would typically be my actions list, where I'd outline the things that I was doing for my goals, but this time I decided to expand my self-care habit tracker so that it took up a full spread. This is another one of the changes that I've made for my October setup, because I'm very into the idea of having a low bar and a high bar for each of my habits. By this I effectively mean you set yourself a habit, say drinking water every day, and then you have a low bar and a high bar for the completion of that habit. The low bar is something super small, so it might be take a sip of water, or maybe even just fill up your water bottle, whereas the high bar is a higher level of completion, so this could be drink a full liter of water. I've been finding that I'm much more successful with my habit completion if I set the low bar to be super low, and then the high bar to be something that's still achievable, but a bit of a stretch. So I want to try and set myself a high bar and a low bar for each of my self-care habits to kind of help encourage me to get them done. The left-hand page is where I'm going to be tracking my habit completion. So we have a row for each of the days of the month and a column for each of the habits I'm tracking. And then the colored bars that I'm doing on the right-hand page at the moment are where I'm going to be setting what my high and low bar are. The colored blocks themselves are where I'm just going to write out the general habit. And then the pink dot will be representing having met the low bar and writing out what the metric of success for the low bar is, and then the kind of green or teal color is the high bar, and specifying what the high bar is for that habit. Then for each day, I'll just fill in whether it's a pink dot or a teal dot for each of the habits. If I don't actually meet the low bar, it'll either be left blank, or more likely I'll go and put a light grey dot in. As I mentioned before, one of the downfalls of filming before I've planned out is sitting there having a lot of thinking time. For instance, I had about 11 minutes just sitting here trying to figure out what to do with the self-care habit header. Initially, I had lettered it out using similar lettering to what I had on the front page, which, might I add, took about 16 minutes to figure out what I wanted to do with that one. So I was like, hey, you've already spent the time thinking about this, you know what style of lettering you want to use, and then I actually put it onto the page, and it looked weird. I think it was the S in self-care in particular that I wasn't quite gelling with. So I just decided to cover this over with a piece of paper that I cut off when I was making the waterfall tabs. Nice and simple solution, a lot easier to do. I'm actually really looking forward to using this habit tracker. I like the kind of partial credit that I'm giving myself when I meet that low bar, compared to just relying on the did I or did I not reach the high bar. But on to our next layout. This one is going to be a return of a layout that we've had a while ago, but done a little bit tweaked because, as said, I changed up a heap of things in this setup. And this one is going to be a meal log / planner. Vogel and I like to plan our dinners in advance, so I wanted to have a space to write out what the plan was for our weekly dinners, but I also want to get better at recording what I'm actually eating. Not only in terms of what the foods were, but then also taking a more overarching view and thinking about, have I gotten my fruit and veg serves today? Have I had a decent source of protein? Did I end up just defaulting to takeout? So for the 7 columns that I've drawn into the tracker, the one on the very left is just to specify the day and day of the week. The one next to this is the place for me to put in the meal plan, so what dinner are we planning on having for each day of the month. After this, the narrow column is where I can track that fruit and veg consumption. Was it fast food? Did I have protein? And then the following 4 columns are just to record what I actually ate. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, and any snacks. You may well know that I'm addicted to highlighting every second line, so I had to do that on the tracker. Not only do I think it looks nice, it just adds some more color to the layout, but it also really helps with readability. Because the layout spans the full spread, and I've only got the numbers for the days of the month down the left-hand side, when you're starting to fill in columns that are a fair bit further away, it can be kind of hard to see which day you're recording information for. So highlighting every second line just helps me keep track of which row is for which day. One of the things that I've noticed with working for myself is that I have a tendency to just go get started with my day pretty much as soon as I, wake up, finish my morning routine, without having eaten any breakfast. And then I'll just work through until about 2 p.m. and sit there thinking, why is everything so frustrating? Why is everything so hard? And then be like, oh, no, you're hangry. You should probably go eat something. I'm hoping that this meal log will either help me remember to eat breakfast or at least give me some data around what my eating habits are actually like. Flipping over though, and we're onto a completely new to me layout, and this is what I'm calling a work scheduler. One of the things that I'm trying to get into the habit of with my work routines is kind of batching my work so that I'm not filming and editing and scripting and doing whatever else every single day. I'd much rather have it that I have maybe 2 days a week that I'm filming and 1 day a week that I'm focusing on scripting. So scripting for multiple videos on that one day and filming for multiple videos on those filming days. In order to actually plan that though, I wanted to have a layout that would help me do that. And that's where this scheduler comes in. On the left-hand page, we're going to have a section that has the numbers for each day of the month running down the page, just like we had on my habit tracker. And then each of the columns is going to be a different piece of content or work that I'm putting out. Effectively a release of some description, whether that be a video release for the channel or something like a membership perk that I'm putting out on Patreon or YouTube. Once I've written in all of those pieces of work that have to get done for the month, I can then start to map out which days of the month I'm actually working on those things, and in particular, what type of work am I doing on them. The first thing I'll probably do is go in and just map out when things are actually being released, because you can't really work on making something after you're supposed to have released that something. But once I have the release days in, I can backwards plan when I'm going to work on specific tasks for each of those releases. On the right hand side though, I wanted to have a calendar layout because my mind works better with the calendar grid rather than just a string of numbers. And I also wanted to include a key for the different types of work that I can do for each of my releases. Mainly so then I can use those colors on the calendar to color code what's happening on which days. I did have a little bit of extra space, so the box in the bottom right corner is just for additional notes. For instance, I might find something else that I can use that box for, and I can just write it down in there, so I have that as a note for the next monthly setup. I'm actually quite excited about using this layout, and I'd be keen to make more layouts about work-related stuff that you can put in your journal. If that's something that you would like to see, make sure to let me know in the comments. But flipping on over, no, I did not forget it. We are of course going to have my actions list, but I thought it might be cool to put this next to my monthly reflection, mainly because the reflection process that I go through each month is very much related to my goals, and my actions list is all about the stuff that I'm doing to work on those goals. The left-hand page is where I'm going to be putting that actions list. It doesn't require a lot of setup, just writing in the title. And then the right-hand page is going to be that monthly reflection or monthly review. The layout of that one is fairly straightforward. It's just 9 separate boxes that I can fill in different stuff that's related to reflection. So for instance, what wins did I have for the month? What challenges did I face? One change that I have made on this though is rather than calling it improvements, I'm calling it lessons, because I think that better describes what I actually end up writing in the box. The other sections we have though are my memories from the month, things that I'm looking forward to, and things that I'm nervous about in the month coming up. A place to do a small financial review, a place to outline what goals that I worked on for the month, and then a place to reflect on my bullet journal. What did work during the month? What didn't work quite so much? Is there anything that I want to keep, scrap, change, or try in the month ahead? Heading into the flip through though, I will say that even though I'm not really into pastels, I actually really like how this setup turned out. It was really fun getting to try some different decorative elements with the Waterfall tabs, and also flex those creativity muscles to make some new layouts. It's been a while since I've changed things in my layouts to this extent in a monthly setup, and I'm really interested to see how using them actually goes in terms of productivity, keeping me accountable to my habits, all of that kind of stuff. As we talked about, using Waterfall tabs in my journal is something that's new to me, and if you wanted to try them out for yourself, we do have a quick tutorial video in the top left, or if you were still on the hunt for October bullet journal inspiration, the playlist at the bottom is for you. Click or tap on either of those and I'll see you over there.